I stood in the middle of the gallery and looked at the walls, where dozens of my own faces looked back at me, and realized that someone had been watching me for months, studying my every grimace, every glance, and I had no idea. But I need to start earlier, with that very bus. With route number 12, which I caught every morning at 8:15 at the corner of Sadovaya and Lenin. I had a job, a manager in an office selling some kind of security systems. Boring shit, to be honest. You come in, pretend to be busy, and leave. The salary was average. There were no prospects, but I had neither the strength nor the desire to change anything. I just went with the flow, like everyone else. I always took the same bus. I even knew which seats were usually free. I would sit by the window, put on my headphones, and scroll through my phone, my standard morning routine. The people around me changed, but overall everything was predictable. A pensioner with a shopping bag, students with sleepy faces, a man in overalls who smelled of tobacco and morning hangover, and then 2 months ago he appeared. I didn't notice him right away. Just a guy, skinny, in worn jeans and a knitted sweater. He got on at the same stop as me, always with headphones and a notebook. His blonde hair was always tousled, as if he had just gotten out of bed. He looked like a typical art student or some kind of freelance designer. There are plenty of those in the city. But something about him caught my attention. Maybe it was the way he sat, always by the window, always slightly detached, as if the whole world around him didn't exist. Or the way he moved his pencil across his notebook, quickly, confidently, without looking up. His hands were somehow special. Long fingers, thin wrists. Sometimes they were stained with paint, blue, red, black. I caught myself watching him. Just watching him when he was drawing or looking out the window. I chalked it up to boredom. The bus ride was long, 40 minutes to the center. What else was there to do? But to be honest, there was something else. Something I didn't even want to admit to myself. We never spoke. We didn't even say hello. Just two people who ride the same route at the same time. Random fellow travelers. Sometimes our eyes met. I quickly looked away, pretending to look out the window past him. I felt like an idiot. Why was I staring at a stranger? But there was one strange thing. Several times I noticed that he was looking at me too. Not just a glance, a long, studying look, as if he was trying to see something, to remember something. I chalked it up to paranoia. Maybe I had something on my face, or a stain on my shirt, or maybe he was just looking at me, lost in thought, and I was reading too much into it. Once I remember he stared at me for 3 minutes without looking away. I sat there, pretending not to notice, but I could feel his gaze on my skin. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and turned around. He didn't look away right away. For a second, we just stared at each other, and I couldn't understand what was going on. Then he blinked, looked down at his notebook, and started drawing again. My heart was beating as if I had run a marathon. I said to myself then, enough. This is bullshit. Normal people don't stare at strangers on public transport and make up romantic nonsense. I had a girlfriend, by the way. Well, I did 6 months ago, then we broke up. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything. I continued to take the same bus. I could have chosen a different route. There's the 37, which requires a transfer but takes the same amount of time. Or the subway. But no, every morning at 8:15, the 12 bus. I told myself it was just convenient, familiar. I didn't want to admit that I was looking for him in the crowd every time I got on the bus. And then that morning happened. It was the middle of the week, Wednesday, I think. The bus was packed, rush hour, everyone going to work. I was standing in the aisle, holding onto the handrail. He was sitting in his usual spot by the window, drawing something again. I tried not to look in his direction, but I could see him out of the corner of my eye. And then the driver slammed on the brakes. Some idiot was crossing the road. The bus jerked so hard that I lost my balance and flew forward. I was already imagining how I would crash into the backs of the seats, but someone's hand grabbed my elbow and held me back. I turned around. It was him. He got up from his seat and held my hand. He was standing so close that I could smell something like turpentine and coffee. Our faces were only a few inches apart. "Be careful," he says. His voice is quiet with a hoarseness to it. "Thank you," I managed to say. He smiles, quickly, shyly, and immediately lets go of my hand, sits back down, turns away to the window. But I saw that smile. I saw his cheeks flush, and I felt the heat rush to my neck and face. I went home that evening and couldn't forget that smile. It was as if it had been imprinted somewhere inside me and now popped up every time I tried to think about something else. And the warmth of his palm on my elbow, such a strange feeling, as if the touch had left a mark. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking, what the hell is happening to me? So what if the guy caught you so you wouldn't fall? It's a normal human reaction. Anyone would have done the same. But then why can't I get it out of my head? The next 3 weeks were kind of weird. I kept riding the same bus and he kept showing up. But now there was something different between us. I don't know how to explain it. It was as if an invisible thread had been stretched between us after that incident. We still didn't talk, but now when our eyes met, he didn't look away immediately. Neither did I. Sometimes he smiled at me, just slightly with the corners of his lips. I nodded in response. That was the extent of our communication. But every time it happened, something inside me shifted. I began to notice details. How he bites his lower lip when he's focused on a drawing. How he touches his hair, brushing it back from his forehead. How he wrinkles his nose when someone wearing strong perfume gets on the bus. How he sometimes just sits and looks out the window with an expression on his face, as if he sees something others don't. Once I plucked up the courage and stood next to his seat, even though there were empty seats further away. He looked up at me and I saw his eyes up close, gray-blue with some green flecks. Fucking beautiful. I looked away, feeling my ears burn. I started catching myself thinking about him throughout the day. At work, during lunch, before bed. I imagined walking up to him and just saying, "Hi, how are you? What are you drawing?" But every time I chickened out, what if he thought I was weird? Or that I was hitting on him? Although, maybe I was hitting on him, I just didn't want to admit it to myself. I've never had anything with guys. I mean, I've had thoughts, of course. Once in college, a classmate kissed me at a drinking party. I pushed him away and pretended it was a joke. Then I couldn't forget the feeling of his lips for a whole week. But it never went beyond that. It was easier and clearer with girls. I didn't have to explain anything to myself. And then, suddenly, this guy from the bus, and I can't think about anything else. Friday. The end of the work week, I'm going home in a half-dead state. It was a long day. My boss was nagging me about some report. I just wanted to get to the couch and pass out. The bus is almost empty. It's evening. Rush hour is over. I got off at my stop, listening to some catchy music on my headphones. I was walking home thinking about ordering pizza and watching a TV series, and then someone called out to me from behind. I turned around and for a second didn't understand what was going on. It was him. The guy from the bus. He was standing a few steps away, looking kind of nervous. He was crumpling some kind of flyer in his hands, shifting from foot to foot. "Sorry for catching up with you," he says quickly. "It's just, I saw you get off and thought. Anyway." He falls silent, looks away, then back at me. I stand there, one earbud out, trying to figure out what's going on. "I have an exhibition tomorrow," he finally blurts out. "Would you like to come?" He hands me a flyer. I take it automatically, look at it, but the letters blur before my eyes. My heart starts beating so loudly that I think he can hear it. "Why are you calling me?" I blurt out. It sounds rude, even though I didn't mean it to. He blushes. Right there, before my eyes, his cheeks, neck, even his ears. He looks away. "Just come. You'll understand," he says quietly, and he quickly turns around, walks away, almost runs. I stand in the middle of the street with a flyer in my hand, unable to move. Passers-by walk around me. Someone bumps into my shoulder, but I don't react. I watch the receding figure, disheveled hair, old jacket, hands in pockets. Then I look down at the flyer. Loft Gallery downtown. Tomorrow, Saturday, starting at noon. Young artist Ilya Sokolov. Exhibition of portraits. Travel companions. And at the bottom, in small print, free admission. Ilya. So his name is Ilya. I came home, threw my jacket on the sofa, and didn't order pizza. I sat in the kitchen, drank tea, and looked at the flyer. I turned it over in my hands, reread it, tried to understand what it meant. Why did he invite me specifically? We don't even know each other. Maybe he's inviting everyone he can find, trying to get as many people as possible to come to the exhibition. That's what aspiring artists do, right? They hand out flyers and invite random people. But then why was he so nervous? Why did he blush? And that look, as if he wanted to say something but couldn't bring himself to. I went to bed around midnight, but I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, staring into the darkness. My phone was glowing on the nightstand. I checked the time every half hour. I thought about tomorrow, about whether to go or not. It's strange to go to an exhibition of someone I've never really talked to. What will I do there? Stand, look at the paintings, put on a smart face? What if he comes up to me and starts talking? What will we talk about? But on the other hand, he called me. He waited until I left, then caught up with me. That means something, right? At 3 a.m, I said to myself, okay, fuck it, I'll go. At least out of curiosity. I'll look at his work and understand what he does. And maybe I'll finally figure out what's going on between us. Or not going on, and that I made it all up. In the morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. My head was buzzing, my eyes were red. I drank coffee, took a shower, tried to cheer myself up. I looked at myself in the mirror, unshaven, disheveled, with bruises under my eyes. Fucking handsome. I started thinking about what to wear. I opened the closet and went through all my shirts, jeans, and sweaters. What do people wear to exhibitions anyway? To be honest, I've never been to one. Cultural life has somehow passed me by. In the end, I chose dark jeans and a gray shirt. Neutral, but not quite like a bum. I looked at my watch, 11 a.m. The exhibition started at noon. It would take me 40 minutes to get there. I left the house at 11:30. I walked to the subway and my legs grew heavier with every step. Part of me wanted to turn around and go home, to forget about this whole idea. But another part, the part that had kept me awake all night, pulled me forward. I got to the center and got off at the right station. The gallery was in an old building, a former factory. Now they've turned it into some kind of creative space, workshops, studios. A typical hipster place. I stood in front of the entrance for about 5 minutes. I smoked, even though I had been trying to quit for a month. I watched the people coming and going, mostly young people, stylishly dressed with intelligent faces. I felt out of place. I put out my cigarette. I took a deep breath. I went inside. The gallery was on the second floor. I climbed the stairs and heard soft music and voices. A girl was standing at the entrance with a sign pointing toward the hall. I nodded to her and went in, and I stopped dead in my tracks. The walls. All the walls were covered with portraits. I took a few steps forward, not believing my eyes. I approached the first work, and my heart sank. It was me in profile looking out the window. Pencil, clear lines, light and shadow. Recognizable down to the details. The mole above my eyebrow. The shape of my nose. Even the scar on my chin left over from a fight at school. I slowly turned around, looking around the room. The next portrait was me again. This time, it was a full-face portrait with a pensive expression. Charcoal, blurred lines, but still me. Next, me with a phone in my hands, me with my eyes closed, me smiling at something, me frowning, me tired, me everywhere. Dozens of portraits, maybe more. Different techniques, pencil, charcoal, watercolor, pastel. Some were very detailed, worked out to the smallest detail. Some were quick sketches, but even in them my face was recognizable. I stood in the middle of this room and couldn't breathe. My legs wouldn't hold me. My mouth was dry. My thoughts were confused. They didn't fit together into a single picture. It's impossible. It's unreal. He drew me. For months. Every day, probably. He studied every feature, every expression. I was in his sketchbook all this time, and I had no idea. You're here. A voice behind me. I spun around. Ilya was standing a few feet away, pale, looking guilty. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. "What the fuck is this?" I blurted out. My voice sounded strange, hoarse. He flinched but didn't back away. "I know how it looks," he said quietly. "I know it's strange, probably even scary, but I couldn't help drawing." I was silent. I didn't know what to say. What could anyone say in a situation like this? "From the moment I first saw you on the bus," Ilya continued, taking a step closer, "you have such a face. So much emotion, so much depth. I just couldn't stop." I looked at the nearest portrait. In it I was looking out the window, and my face had such an expression of longing, of fatigue, as if my whole life was reflected in that gaze. I didn't know I looked like that. I had never seen myself that way. "You don't even know me," I said, without taking my eyes off the portrait. "I do," he replied. "More than you think. I know how you frown when you're thinking about something. How you smile with the corners of your lips when you're reading something on your phone. How you touch your nose when you're tired. How you bite your cheek from the inside when you're nervous." He fell silent. I turned to him. He looked at me with such tenderness that it made me uncomfortable. "I've been watching you for months," Ilya said. It sounds like a maniac's confession, I know, but it wasn't obsession. It was admiration. Silence. All I could hear was soft music in the background and the muffled voices of other visitors somewhere in the next room. I looked at the portraits again. I walked along the wall, examining each one. In some, I looked handsome, not like I see myself in the mirror every day. Different. Interesting. Alive. There was one portrait, a watercolor with blurred lines and soft tones. I was smiling in it. Not broadly, not deliberately, just a slight, warm smile. I couldn't remember the last time I had smiled like that. But Ilya had seen it. He remembered it. He painted it. "Why did you call me here?" I asked without turning around. "Because I couldn't not call you," he replied. "You deserve to see how I see you." I turned around. He was standing in the same place, not coming closer. There was such hope and such fear in his eyes at the same time. "This is all. Too much for me," I said honestly. "I need to think." I saw his face flinch, but he nodded. "I understand. I'm sorry if—" "Wait," I interrupted him. "You said you admired me. Was that just about the drawing?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he slowly shook his head. "No, not just that." My heart started beating faster. I swallowed, trying to get rid of the lump in my throat. "I don't. I've never been with guys," I blurted out. I don't know why I said that. It just slipped out. "I know," Ilya said quietly. "I saw how you looked. How you looked away when our eyes met. How you blushed." Damn, so I was that obvious. "But I'm not asking you for anything," he continued. "Really? I just wanted you to see these works. To understand how I feel about you." I was silent. My head was in complete chaos. On the one hand, it was really strange, almost creepy. A stranger had been drawing you for months without your knowledge. On the other hand, when I looked at these portraits, I saw something real in them. It was as if Ilya saw me for who I really am, not who I pretend to be. And that scared me the most. "Let me make it up to you," Ilya said suddenly, taking a step forward. "Come to my studio. I'll paint your portrait the way you want it. With your consent, with your participation, you'll control the process. It will be your portrait, not my fantasy." I looked at him. He was sincere. It was evident in every movement, every word. "Why do I need this?" I asked, even though I already knew I would agree. Ilya smiled, sadly, gently. "Because you deserve to see yourself as you really are. Beautiful." That word hit me right in the chest. No one had ever called me that before. Beautiful. Usually they said normal, okay, passable. But beautiful, never. "Okay," I heard my voice say. "When?" Ilya's eyes lit up. "Tonight, if you're free." I nodded. He took out his phone and began to dictate the address. I entered it into my map. An old house in a historic district, an attic. "Be there at 8. "See you then," he said quietly. "See you then," I replied. I left the gallery in a state of numbness. It was sunny and noisy outside, a typical Saturday in the city center. People were walking, laughing, sitting in cafes, and I walked, seeing nothing around me. I went into the first bar I came across and ordered a whiskey. I sat at the bar, twirling the glass in my hands and trying to figure out my feelings. It was scary, very scary, because I understood that something important, something decisive, was happening. Tonight I would go to his studio, and after that my life would never be the same. I could feel it in my gut. But along with the fear there was something else. Anticipation, curiosity, a desire to understand what would happen next. I finished my whiskey, paid the bill, and left. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 hours until the meeting. I went home, took a shower, and changed clothes again, this time just into a t-shirt and jeans. I tried to read, to watch something, but I couldn't concentrate. At 7:30, I was already standing in front of that house. An old brick building, peeling paint on the door, a narrow staircase leading up. I went up to the top floor. The door had no nameplate, just the apartment number scratched on the doorframe. I stood there gathering my courage. I pressed the doorbell. The door opened almost immediately. Ilya stood in the doorway, in his home clothes, an old t-shirt and pants, barefoot. His hair was even more disheveled, and there was a paint stain on his face. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. I went inside and stopped, looking around. It was a real artist's studio. A huge space with high ceilings, large windows covering the entire wall, through which soft evening light poured in. Canvases were everywhere, on easels, leaning against the walls, scattered on the floor. It smelled of paint, turpentine, and something else. Maybe coffee. In the corner behind a screen, he could see a bed, a table littered with brushes and tubes of paint, an old sofa and bookshelves. "Would you like some coffee? Or wine?" Ilya asked, closing the door. "Wine, please," I replied. I needed something to relax. He took out a bottle of red wine and poured 2 glasses. He didn't even have proper wine glasses, just ordinary faceted glasses. He handed me one and took the other himself. "To new beginnings?" he suggested with an uncertain smile. "To new beginnings," I agreed. We drank. The wine was tart, warming my throat and stomach. I sat down on the sofa, and Ilya settled into the armchair opposite me. We were silent for a while, just drinking. "How long have you lived here?" I asked, to break the silence. 2 years, he replied. "I rent it for pennies. The owner has completely forgotten about this place. But I have my own workshop. How's life? Can you make a living from art?" He smiled. "Barely. Sometimes I take orders. Portraits for holidays, decorating cafes. But mostly I paint for myself, and you draw your fellow bus passengers," I added with a smile. He blushed. "Not usually. You're the first." "Really?" "Really." We fell silent again. I finished my wine and he poured me another. The alcohol began to take effect, relaxing my muscles and blurring boundaries. "Tell me about yourself," Ilya asked. "I've been watching you for so long, but I don't know anything about you." I shrugged. "There's nothing to tell. My life is boring. Work, home, sometimes meeting friends. No hobbies, no passions. What about before? Did you have any dreams?" I thought about it. When was the last time I thought about my dreams? "In school, I wanted to be a photographer," I finally said. "I even bought a camera and took pictures of all kinds of nonsense. But then, I don't know. Somehow it just faded away. My parents said it wasn't serious, that I needed to get a normal profession. I listened to them. Do you regret it? I don't know. Sometimes I think it could have been different. But it's too late to change anything now." 26 isn't too late," Ilya objected. "Maybe," I didn't argue. He told me about himself. How he studied architecture, but in his 3rd year realized it wasn't for him. He dropped out and enrolled in painting classes. His parents were furious and stopped talking to him for 6 months. Then they came to terms with it, but the relationship remained strained. "But don't you regret it?" I asked. "Not for a second," he replied firmly. "It's better to be poor, but do what you love than sit in an office and slowly die inside." His words hit home. That's exactly how I've been feeling these past few years, like I'm slowly dying inside. We talked for over an hour. He talked about art, what inspires him, his favorite artists. I listened and asked questions. A strange ease developed between us, as if we had known each other for years, not just a couple of hours. At one point, he put his glass on the table and said, "Shall we begin?" "Let's," I agreed. He got up, walked over to the easel, brought a chair, and placed it by the window. "Sit here. The light is perfect right now." I sat down. The evening sun flooded the studio with warm golden light. Ilya took a sheet of paper, secured it to the tablet, and sat down opposite me with a pencil. "Relax," he said softly. "No need to pose. Just sit comfortably." I leaned back in my chair and put my hand on the armrest. I looked out the window at the rooftops and the sky, which was beginning to turn pink. Ilya began to draw. I could hear the scratching of his pencil on the paper, his quiet breathing. Sometimes he would look up at me, then bend over the sheet again. 20 minutes passed. I was already getting used to the silence, to his gaze, to the strange intimacy of the process. Can you look here? He asked. I turned my head. Our eyes met. He held my gaze, studying my face. I felt my cheeks burning, but I didn't look away. Perfect, he whispered and continued drawing. Half an hour later, he put down his pencil and leaned back in his chair. The first sketch is ready. Would you like to see it? I stood up and walked over. On the sheet of paper was me, a detailed portrait, every feature drawn with such precision that it took my breath away. But at the same time, there was something soft and warm about the drawing. I looked. Peaceful. It's beautiful, I said quietly. You are beautiful, he replied simply. I looked at him. He was standing close, very close. He smelled of paint and something else, maybe his own scent, warm and pleasant. Can I ask you something? He said quietly. This is going to sound strange, but could you take off your shirt? I froze. Why? The light falls on you so beautifully. The lines of your shoulders, your collarbones. It would be incredible. But only if you agree. I don't want to pressure you. I hesitated. The alcohol hadn't completely worn off yet. My head felt light, my boundaries blurred. The atmosphere of the studio, the soft light, Ilya's closeness. It all created a feeling of unreality, as if I were in a dream. And something inside me said, do it. Just once in your life, do something spontaneous, something risky. Okay, I said and reached for the buttons on my shirt. He unbuttoned them one by one, pulled his shirt over his head, and placed it on the back of the chair. He stood before him with his torso bare, feeling goosebumps run across his skin, not from the cold, but from his gaze. Ilya was watching. Not the way one looks at a body with desire, different. With a kind of reverence, as if he were looking at a work of art. Please sit down, he asked hoarsely. I sat back down. He took a new sheet of paper and began to draw. Quick, confident strokes. I could feel his gaze on my skin, how he was studying the line of my shoulder, the curve of my neck, the relief of my collarbones. Time passed strangely. Maybe half an hour went by, maybe an hour. It was completely dark outside, and Ilya turned on the lamp in the studio, a soft, warm light. He put down his charcoal and looked at me for a long time. One more question, he said quietly. Are you ready to go further? What do you mean? I asked, even though I knew. Yes, completely. It will be. It will be the most beautiful work I have ever created. But only if you want it yourself. Silence. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, loud and fast. I looked at him, trying to understand what I was feeling. Scary. This is crazy. I came for a regular portrait, and now I'm sitting here with my shirt off, and he's offering me. But along with the fear, there was something else. Desire. Not sexual, and something else. The desire to trust, to let go of control, to do something I had never done before. All my life I've played by the rules. I was good, obedient, did what I was supposed to do. And what did it get me? A boring job, an empty life, the feeling that I was dying inside. Just once, damn it. Just once in my life I want to do something for myself. Something spontaneous, risky, alive. Okay, I whispered, and reached for my belt. I unbuckled the buckle, unzipped my jeans. I stood up, pulled them down along with my underwear, and threw them on the floor. I stood naked in front of him, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. Ilya watched. His eyes were wide open, his lips slightly parted. He raised his hand with the charcoal and froze. You are beautiful, he said hoarsely, and he began to draw. I returned to the chair. The light from the lamp fell on my body, creating a play of shadows. It was cold, not from the temperature, but from the feeling of my own vulnerability. I felt exposed, defenseless, and at the same time, more alive than ever before. Ilya drew in silence. Occasionally he asked me to turn, raise my arm, tilt my head. I did everything he said. Time lost its meaning again. At one point he came closer to adjust my pose. He touched my shoulder and turned me toward the light. His fingers were warm, his touch gentle. But the touch lasted too long. I'm sorry, he whispered, but he didn't remove his hand. Don't apologize, I replied, and there was something new in my voice. His hand slid up my shoulder to my neck. He lifted my face and made me look at him. We were so close that I could feel his breath on my lips. I shouldn't, Ilya said, but you want to. I finished. Very much, he breathed. I leaned in first. Our lips met, gently at first, almost weightlessly. But then something broke inside me, and I pulled him toward me, kissing him greedily, desperately. Ilya responded with equal passion. His hand slid over my naked body, leaving fiery traces. I could feel him through the fabric of my clothes, his warmth, his firmness. I pulled him toward me, unable to stop. We kissed for a long time, gasping for breath. Hands everywhere, in my hair, on my back, on my chest. The whole world narrowed down to these touches, to the taste of his lips, to the heat between us. The bed, he breathed between kisses, nodding toward the corner of the studio. We moved there without interrupting the kiss. I tripped over something, we almost fell, laughed, but didn't stop. We reached the bed behind the screen and fell onto it together. Ilya leaned over me, looking into my eyes. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes," I replied and pulled him toward me again. What happened next dissolved into a fog. Touches, kisses, the heat of our bodies, his skin under my hands, his breath on my ear. Sensations I had never experienced before. We lost ourselves in each other that night. We found something we weren't even looking for. And when it was over, we lay there entwined, and I felt whole for the first time in a long time. I woke up from the light. The bright morning sun poured through the huge studio windows directly onto the bed. I squinted, turned on my side, and saw Ilya next to me. He was asleep, his face relaxed, his hair even more tousled. One hand was resting on my chest. I froze, not daring to move so as not to wake him. Memories of yesterday began to surface. The gallery, the portraits, the studio, wine, conversations. And then what happened on this bed? Panic rose inside me. What had I done? I slept with a guy, a stranger I'd known for barely a couple of hours. This is crazy. This isn't me. I don't do things like this. But then another thought occurred to me. Who are you anyway? A proper office worker who lives a boring life and is slowly dying inside? Maybe this is the real you, the one who is capable of spontaneity, risk, and real feelings. Ilya stirred and opened his eyes. He saw me and smiled sleepily and softly. "Hello," he whispered. "Hi," I replied. We lay there silently, just looking at each other. His hand was on my chest, mine was on his waist. The intimacy of the moment was almost unbearable. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. I thought about it. Do I regret it? Am I scared? Yes. Is it confusing? Yes. But do I regret it? No, I replied honestly. I don't regret it. His smile widened. He pulled me closer and kissed me, gently, without yesterday's passion, but no less exciting. We spent another 2 hours in bed. We talked, kissed, just lay there embracing each other. He told me about his plans, exhibitions, projects, dreams. I listened and thought that it had been a long time since I had felt so. Needed. Important. Visible. Then we got up. He made coffee. Terrible, too strong, but I drank it and smiled. We stood in his kitchen, in our underwear, drinking coffee and laughing at some silly thing. What now? I asked suddenly. Ilya looked at me seriously. What do you want to happen? I don't know, I replied honestly. It's all too fast. Too much for one day. I understand, he nodded. We can go at your pace. No rush. Do you want to continue? I couldn't believe I was asking this question. Very much, he replied simply, but only if you want it too. I looked at him, disheveled, barefoot, with a paint stain on his cheek. This strange, talented, sincere man who saw in me what I myself did not notice. I want to, I said. It's scary, but I want to. He hugged me tightly, and I buried my face in his shoulder, feeling something inside me finally break and reassemble in a new way. I left around noon. I got dressed, and he walked me to the door. We stood on the threshold, holding hands, and I couldn't bring myself to leave. Will I see you again? He asked. Tomorrow. On the bus? I replied with a smile. And not just on the bus, he added, kissing me goodbye. I went down the stairs and out onto the street. The city was noisy and bright, a typical Sunday morning. But as I walked, I felt that everything had changed. I had changed. In just one day, my life had been turned upside down. From gray, boring, predictable, it had become different. Frightening, exciting, alive. And as I rode home on the subway, looking at my reflection in the dark window glass, I saw myself for the first time in a long time as Ilya saw me. Beautiful.